film about credit card abuses, tens of thousands. Getting hooked on credit cards, overpriced. Creating awareness of the problem, priceless. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's 29% interest. The companies say that if people are misled, it's because they aren't paying attention. They distinguish between bad credit and good credit and call for consumer responsibility.
Your choice, your chase.
Today, there are more choices and more complexity about these loan products than ever before.
Doug Lebda founded LendingTree.com, a big internet-based lender.
And not only complexity in terms of the products, but also in terms of how to use them wisely. And all of this comes at a time when we as Americans are expected to take more financial and personal responsibility for our financial futures than did generations in the past.
Doug is right. Consumers are confused, but the companies thrive on that confusion too.
The focus seems to be on individual responsibility. What is the responsibility of the industry here?
This is an incredibly complex world that we're living in with very, very complex products, and obviously the stakes are extremely high. I think it's important that consumers stay very informed in that process, and we as LendingTree, as well as the industry in general, I think can do a very good job in helping to educate and helping to inform and making sure that consumers get the right answers.
Bullshit. Did the banks say the same thing about mortgages? Did they say, we'll give anybody a mortgage? No, they have pretty strict restrictions and criteria by which they determine a mortgage.
But that's what they say.
Any institution that lends you money is obligated to define the conditions under which they're lending you money, which are commensurate with your ability to pay.
Isn't that their responsibility? Don't they have a responsibility?
Who's the they?
The banks.
Of course they do.
lenders.
Of course they do. We're doomed to shop till we drop. Two-thirds of our economy is based on consumption, which leads to a rather petrifying paradox. If we cut back on consumption, which obviously is good for the environment, it's good for a number of things, the U.S. economy collapses. In a sense, we've built an economy that needs rampant consumerism as a fuel just to keep the engine going.
I know I'm not the only one dealing with this because I spend a lot of my time at the park. I call it the office because that's where I live basically and work. And all of the moms that I know talk about this. This is part of our coping mechanism is being able to complain to each other about how this is really affecting our lives. Tops on the conversation list is always our financial situation.
You pay the minimum every month. You don't get ahead on anything. You do shuffle. We have an American Express that you have to pay off every month, so that gets shifted. We just shifted like $2,000 onto a Discover card that has the most ridiculous interest. And so that's got like $5 grand on it now.
I just feel like everyone is kind of living above their means or struggling to get kind of what people could have years ago, like a house and a car.
We're so used to spending beyond what we actually have that the possibility that we could end up with nothing just doesn't seem real because when we don't have anything, we just charge it.
I mean, anything can happen if people are spending fake money, you know, getting into debt up to their eyeballs. I mean, anything can happen.
It's always Christmas time for Visa. MasterCard gets presents every day. They're happy as can be when we discover 'neath our tree the finance charge that never goes away.
As of Christmas 2005, the national debt stood at $8,179,165,267,626.42. Break that down, and each American share comes to $27,439.48, and that's per person.
I'm going to be screwed. I don't like that at all.
This debt increases on average $2.83 billion per day.
The payments that we're making are the gift that keeps on taking and leaves us buried deeper every year.
As the national debt threatens to rise to $10 trillion, a new national debt clock is being built.
I know nothing about it.
I know absolutely nothing except for it's just making my family even more poor.
These figures boggle the mind and for most of us remain an abstraction. Few understand who is really responsible for this debt or what can be done about it.
I know the figure behind me is what each family or each person in the family owes. I don't even make that kind of money. That's crazy. I'll never be able to pay it off in my life, okay?
I don't know whether that's a graphic enough demonstration for a country that has the biggest deficit in its history, which, as I say, is bad for America, bad for the whole world.
It is as if there are no limits on how much money the country and its people can borrow. The irony, capitalist America is in debt to communist China to the tune of over $200 billion, the largest amount owed to any country.
They're never going to be repaid.
Economic historian Michael Hudson, who worked for the Chase Bank, says the debt will never be paid back.
Adam Smith said that no government had ever repaid its debts, and the same could be said of the private sector. The U.S. government does not intend to repay its trillion-dollar debt to foreign central banks, and even if it did intend to, there's no way in which it could. Most of the corporations now are avoiding paying their pension fund debts and their health care debts.
The government and big companies may not have to pay, but people like you and me do and will. And our own collective consumer debt is staggering, doubling in the last 10 years. According to the Federal Reserve, it is now over $2 trillion. This figure, representing credit card and car loan debt, excluding mortgages, translates into approximately $18,700 per U.S. household. Add in mortgages, and we're talking another $7 trillion. Borrowing now, paying later has become our way of life.
Shirley, and I'm calling from Card Service. We're in the office today to 10 p.m. Central Time, and it's urgent you return the call today.
Collecting debts today is a growing business, with an army of companies out to pressure you and then sue you when you don't pay off. Even when annoying, these calls seem to be an improvement over the days when a loan shark might break your kneecaps if you didn't pay up on time.
There'll be another envelope, same amount, tomorrow night.
A lawyer who prosecuted loan sharks knows how it works. Lou Cherico.
The loan is enforced by threat, by violence, but in almost no cases does the violence escalate to an actual killing of the victim. Because if the victim is killed, the loan is gone. So if you want to use the term, an administrative beating could be given, a beating enough to make the victim feel threatened, be harmed, but not sufficiently bad so that the victim can't function to get the money to pay the loan shark. That's the way the system works.
These loans are very expensive, but often the only funds small businesses can get.
The guy who has the bodega in the South Bronx, he's got to pay for his vegetables every day. He has a couple of bad weeks. Still, if he doesn't pay the vegetables, they don't deliver. He has nothing to sell. So he goes down the street to his local bar where his local loan shark hangs out, and he says, listen, I need $3,000 for a week. The guy says, I'm going to charge you $500. If you don't pay it back next week, it's $300 for every week after that. What choice does he have?
Today, like the mafia, most of the credit business has gone legit, thanks to laws influenced, if not shaped, by the power and money of big banks. It feels like a conspiracy.
The debt system seems to be creating a nation of scammers. Scammers on the part of banks and financial institutions, and scammers on the part of people who are trying to figure out ways to beat the system. True?
Yes, I agree. I agree they're both co-conspirators.
Tell me about this.
In doing this and making this money, they are in effect perpetuating this conspiracy. because they're giving it to people that they know cannot pay the money back and cannot afford the usury.
In front of a bank, musicians play Shop Around, an old song with a new relevance.
Everybody seems to be in debt. Everybody seems to be behind in their bills.
I am myself.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, taxes are sky high. Everything's going up, and we're not making any more money in our work. I mean, it's not coinciding with the rate of things going up.
But the government says we've never had it better.
Government don't know what they're talking about.
What's that?
They don't live out in the street here.
To interview households who had incomes.
Tamara Drought of the Demos think tank says that while financial education can help some people, it's not the answer, because credit card debt, which has tripled since the 1990s, is a symptom of other changes in the economy that it's rarely connected to.
One, we're not going to educate our way out of this problem. Financial education is wonderful, and we need to do more of it, but what's driving a lot of the debt among these households is not a lack of budgeting or a lack of financial savvy. It's an economy that is increasingly stacked against them. Debt is a symptom of much larger economic and structural issues facing households. One, we've seen a decline in incomes or a stagnation of incomes, particularly in the lower income household range and also for middle income households. At the same time, costs have really skyrocketed. Healthcare, housing costs, the cost of sending a kid to college. And finally, we've got to look at public policy and what has happened. And what we see is a real retrenchment in terms of providing a safety net for households.
How did it happen? How did we go from being a nation that made things to a nation that buys things? How and why has the economy become reorganized around the means of consumption instead of the means of production? When did the mall replace the factory as America's economic engine?
People have difficulty realizing that the new economic conflict in our society is between creditors and debtors. There's still a tendency of many left-wingers to think in terms of the class war and the wars between employers and employees. But the real economic war, where all the money is being made, is between creditors and debtors, because that's a free lunch.
Credit and debt are transforming our industrial economy into one based on financial services and service providers. As the gap between the haves and the have-nots deepens, having property is often considered the only way to build wealth.
The real estate economy is the centerpiece of the American economy. If anybody wonders why the American economy has survived the last half dozen years, it is because the centerpiece real estate economy has done so well.
And isn't credit really central to that, and debt?
Indeed. You do not purchase a high-priced home to live in, typically, without borrowing to buy.
But a 2006 HSBC report found that the biggest rise in housing values is taking place in what they call a bubble zone, with housing overvalued by as much as 40%, creating an illusion of trillions of dollars of inflated wealth. Yet for many Americans, reality is now spelled realty.
Mr. Money, my father's been making payments on our home for years.
That's called mortgage credit. And sometimes the payments may run for as long as 25 years.
Years ago, when suburban families paid off their loans, they had mortgage-burning parties. Remember Archie Bunkers?
Yes! Well, here it is, the bunker mortgage. The Declaration of Independence for us. From now on, we own a whole joint.
20 years old.
Today, most families will never pay off their mortgages because of constant refinancing.
As Napoleon said to Waterloo, this is this. Okay.
Remember when we called our homes our castles? That's a metaphor that goes back